Welcome to the ultimate guide to Azure Availability Sets. This is one of the most fundamental tools for building reliable apps in Azure, but it's also one of the most misunderstood. By the end of this video, you won't just know what an availability set is. You'll have the hands-on skill to build one the right way using infrastructure as code. Okay, before we write a single line of code, we need to get what we're actually building. So what is an Azure Availability Set? At its core, an availability set is just a way to group your virtual machines inside a single Azure data center. Its only job is to tell Azure, hey, these VMs are all part of the same team, so please don't let them all go down at once. Azure takes that instruction and smartly spreads your VMs across different physical hardware. This distribution protects you from the two biggest culprits of downtime in a data center: hardware failures and planned maintenance. To pull this off, availability sets use two key ideas: fault domains and update domains. First up, fault domains. Picture a server rack in a data center. That rack has its own power supply and its own network switch. A fault domain is basically one of those racks. If that power supply blows or the network switch fails, everything in that rack is going offline. By placing your VMs across different fault domains, you're just telling Azure to put them on different racks. Simple as that. So if the hardware in rack 1 kicks the bucket, your VMs in rack 2 and 3 are totally fine, and your app stays online. Azure lets you spread your VMs across up to 3 fault domains, which massively cuts your risk of a single hardware issue causing a total outage. The second concept is the update domain. While fault domains protect you from unplanned problems, update domains protect you from planned maintenance. Azure has to patch and update the host servers your VMs run on, and that often means a reboot. An update domain is a group of VMs that Azure can reboot all at the same time for this maintenance. When you use an availability set, Azure puts your VMs into different update domains and then only works on one domain at a time. Once a domain is rebooted, it's given 30 minutes to fully recover before maintenance starts on the next one. You can have up to 20 update domains. This way, instead of a full outage, you get a rolling update and only a piece of your application is offline at any given time. Now, a quick but really important point. You've probably heard of availability zones in last lesson. It's a super common point of confusion. Here's the simple difference. Availability sets protect you from failures within one data center. Availability zones are the next level up. They protect you from an entire data center failing by spreading your resources across totally separate buildings in an Azure region. Think of availability sets as your first, most essential layer of protection. All right, theory's over. Time to get our hands dirty and build this thing with code. For this walkthrough, you'll need 3 things: an Azure account, the Azure CLI installed and logged in, and Terraform installed on your machine. We explain in previous videos about Terraform configurations files, so let's open the main.tf file and see the configuration. Every resource in Azure has to live in a resource group. It's just a container. Let's make one now. Resource Azure RM Resource Group RG, name equals HA-lab-RG, location equals West US 2. And now for the star of the show, the availability set itself. We use the Azure M_availability set resource. Notice how we're pulling the name and location from the resource group we just defined. That tells Terraform it has to create the resource group first. Resource Azure M_availability set AVSet. Name equals WebApp-availability set. Location equals Azure Resource Group.rg.location. Resource group name equals Azure Resource Group.rg.name. Platform fault domain count equals 2. Platform update domain count equals 5. Managed equals true. Let's break this down. We're asking for 2 fault domains and 5 update domains. That managed equals true part is really important. It makes sure our availability set uses Azure Managed Disks, which is the standard for reliability these days. Of course, an availability set is pretty useless without some VMs in it. Before we can make a VM, it needs a network. So we'll quickly set up a virtual network, a subnet, and a network interface for each of our two VMs, and we did this before in previous lessons. Finally, let's define our two virtual machines. This is where it all comes together. Pay close attention to the availability_set_ID argument. That's the magic link that ties each VM to our availability set. And here's a critical tip. A VM can only join an availability set when it's first created. You can't add a VM to a set later on, so you have to plan ahead. And that's it. That's our whole setup. In just a handful of code blocks, we've defined a resilient 2VM application tier. So let's just quickly recap what we did here. You now get the critical role availability sets play in keeping your apps online. You know the difference between a fault domain and an update domain and why you need both. But more importantly, you have the actual skill to define this setup as code with Terraform, which means you can deploy it perfectly every single time. This isn't just theory, it's a real-world engineering skill that prevents outages, protects your apps, and frankly, makes you a much better cloud engineer. If this guide was helpful and made things click for you, do me a huge favor and hit that like button. It really helps the channel out. For more practical guides on Azure and Terraform, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And finally, I know that was a lot of code. I've put the entire Terraform project up on a public GitHub repo for you. The link is right down in the description. Go grab it, play with it, and use it as a launchpad for your own high availability apps. Thanks for watching.